The Heavy by Sam Qualiana, a short story from the anthology series Nightmares, Dreams, and the Monsters in Between, Volume 2. Stan Richmond sat beside his wife Kendra on the concrete steps of a large mansion. 15-foot fences surrounded the property. Stan wasn't sure how to leave. Stan wasn't sure if he was allowed to leave. Quite frankly, he wasn't sure of anything. Stan and his wife were at this peculiar place to participate in a contest. The hosts randomly invited them to partake via email. He imagined it would be good for them. They'd grown distant in the past few years, detached from one another, mere strangers hiding in the darkness under the same roof in a cold and tiring house. Doing something fresh and new together could be good for their relationship. He placed his hand on Kendra's. The gesture, so unfamiliar it made her flinch. She yielded to the unusual show of affection and let her husband's embrace tighten on her hand. Kendra looked deeply into his eyes. Stan forced a smile, something also unfamiliar to him now in these strange times of uncertainty. There were cameras all over the facility, and he was under the impression they were streaming the show live. Though something felt off with Stan, his memory was hazy. He felt disconnected, and his thoughts jumbled like in a dream. Other people were at this place keeping to themselves like strangers often do. A panel of hosts explained the rules when they first entered the facility. However, what they said was relatively brief and lacking in detail, and all of the contestants' questions went unanswered. Stan found it particularly odd that they requested none of the participants eat until dinner or use the bathroom sink on the first floor. The latter, he assumed, was due to the need for maintenance. The main objective of this contest was to remain at the mansion for longer than any other contestant. They didn't offer a limit on time or ways to remove other guests. Stan wasn't even sure if he and Kendra were on a team or competing against each other. The entire situation seemed unprofessional and poorly executed, but Stan weighed the idea that it could very well be part of a more brilliant scheme. He decided to accept the state of affairs and play the game as they asked. They weren't allowed to bring phones within the facility, so they had no way of knowing who was watching or how wide the broadcast of this new contest was. After waiting for nearly an hour outside with all their belongings, the loud click of a bolt unlocking caught everyone's attention. A tall, dark man with a mustache and an expensive suit greeted the guests, welcoming them inside the mansion. As they entered, the hostess, a charming blonde-haired woman with a rose-pink suit dress, greeted them with a smile.
Hello and welcome to our humble abode. I am Eugene, and my lovely companion here is Delilah. We'll be your hosts during your stay. You may come to us to fulfill any of your needs,
the tall man said. The gracious hosts made introductions, spoke with all the contestants, and answered many straightforward questions. They seemed more helpful than the original hosts, yet still managed to answer the more troubling questions vaguely. One woman grumbled about having to wait until dinner to eat, complaining that she couldn't possibly wait that long as she'd traveled overnight to get here and didn't have the time or money to stop for anything on the way. It came much to Stan's surprise when Eugene presented a pantry full of snacks and offered to make everyone something to eat. "Will we lose the contest if we eat? The others said we couldn't eat until dinner," Stan explained.
Nonsense, that would be cruel. We'll treat you to 3 meals a day or more if you feel inclined. Breakfast is served at 7 a.m. daily, lunch is at noon, and dinner is at 6. You'll never be dismissed for eating. That was never in your contracts,
Eugene informed assuredly. Stan felt like something strange was happening here. Why? Only an hour ago did someone else in the program give him completely different information. He decided not to eat until dinner and wasn't alone in this strategy. Yet others ate lunch and snacks and faced no consequences for their actions. The first few days went by the same. They were breaking all the rules and nobody was leaving. Eventually it got to the point where everyone broke the dinner rule but Stan. After another day of that, he decided they only set that rule as an experiment on the human condition. He stared intensely at a camera in the dining area, making his way to the lunch platters. He grabbed a sandwich, inching it towards his face, and hesitated before setting it back down. He flipped the camera the bird, continuing to glare at the watchful eyes looking down on him. Everyone else had eaten before dinner, but nothing changed. The game continued, and they faced no repercussions once again. But still, he didn't want to break the rules, so he walked away. By day 6, everyone was well acquainted. Stan and Kendra tended a garden in the yard. On a bench nearby, Bill, the robust, sweaty, bald man from room 12, was acting strange. Stan noticed he wasn't the only one. Lois, room 4, the older woman with a raucous laugh, stood by herself, staring at the gate for what seemed like hours. Maybe it was boredom, but this place had a darkness to it. Stan felt pressure weighing over him, yet he was used to that feeling, so he paid it no mind. Tucker, from room 9, walked through the garden, damaging plants carelessly. Stan shouted at him, telling him to watch where he was going, but he didn't even respond. Then, to make matters worse, Gerald, from room 1, did the same as Tucker. Kendra started to cry. These careless fools ruined their garden. "What the hell is wrong with you, Gerald?" Stan shouted. Gerald ignored him, so Stan chased him down and shoved him. "I'm talking to you," he howled. Gerald spun around as if awakened from a trance. "Huh?" he mumbled. "You've ruined the garden. What's with you guys? Just walk around it," Stan yelled. Gerald looked confused with pain in his eyes. "Sorry," he muttered before walking away. Stan was infuriated. He walked away to take a deep breath and get his temper under control. Following the concrete pathway, he tried to walk past Sherry from room 10, but from out of nowhere, Lois shoved Sherry into Stan. For a brief moment, he felt something heavy, like pressure building around himself and the woman. A physical blackness surrounded them, thick and powerful. They were two people stuck together, uncomfortably. Then the pressure stopped. They separated, and the blackness was gone without a trace. He couldn't understand or explain what had just happened. Stan apologized to Sherry.
"It's not your fault,"
she said softly, looking back at Lois before taking off briskly to the house, crying. Something wasn't right. Stan, Sherry, and even Lois could see it.
"I'm sorry, Stan. I don't know why I did that,"
Lois said with trembling hands. "Did you see the blackness?" Stan asked. Lois wept and walked away without saying another word. Stan searched the yard for anyone else to explain what happened to him, but nobody could. He stormed off to the entrance at the end of the driveway, finding Eugene on the other side. He grabbed hold of the gate and felt his arms grow tired. A sadness hit him like a tidal wave, and the blackness swirled around his arms, thinner this time and more subtle than before. He shook it off and did his best to hold in tears. He stared through the gate at Eugene, searching for the words to speak.
"What is happening to you?"
Eugene offered the question. "Yeah," Stan choked.
"What you're experiencing is what we call the heavy. Somehow within these walls, the darkness of oneself emerges physically into our world. Your sorrow, your pain, it all materializes here. I suggest you don't let it consume you,"
Eugene explained. "That doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. I want to leave this place."
"Nothing is impossible, merely improbable. The gate is unlocked. You're free to leave at any time. But if you leave, you forfeit the chance of winning."
"You never even told us what the prize was,"
"You'll have to stick through until the end to find that out,"
Eugene said. Stan wanted to leave, but he couldn't physically force himself to open the gate. He didn't know what was happening. He felt like he had no control of his body. Eugene opened the gate for him. Stan stared for a long moment before retreating to Kendra in the garden. That afternoon, Stan was in the dining room holding a knife. He stared at the blade, allowing his thoughts to drift off to dark places. He felt the heavy, the pressure building around him and the blackness nearly consuming him. All sounds muffled in his ears, the colors of everything around him desaturated and the light faded.
"Are you going to eat something?"
Delilah asked. Suddenly the pressure was gone and the heavy passed. Stan decided he too would no longer follow the rules. He cut a chicken wrap in half, placed it on his plate, and sat for lunch. He observed the paintings on the wall in the large dining room. Each canvas, in his opinion, was a similar blob of black and white imperfection. He contemplated why they displayed such dismal paintings in an otherwise bright and cheerful room. He wondered if they were from the same artist, or if they'd commissioned multiple artists to paint similar styles. Each painting had a personality of its own, and by the time he finished lunch, he'd grown to appreciate the art. As the evening came, Stan and Kendra retired to their room. They sat on the bed together and discussed their day. He told Kendra all about the heavy and everything Eugene told him. They agreed everyone was acting strange, but she didn't see or experience anything like the heavy, so it was difficult for Stan to explain it to her. Kendra pulled out a tablet from the nightstand.
"Delilah gave this to me tonight. She said we could record ourselves and explain what we're experiencing here. Maybe this is for the contest?"
She said, handing it to Stan. He powered on the device and the main menu offered to record or view. He chose to view and the screen showed multiple cameras. Each screen was numbered accordingly to the room the individual was staying in. Stan pressed number 9 first. Tucker's live feed took up the screen. He talked about what he was going through, the pressure, the dread, the heavy. Stan scrolled through other feeds, and each person spoke of similar experiences. He zoomed out to the multi-screen menu, and one caught his attention. Number 4, Lois. The rug seemed to be moving. Was it moving? There was nobody there, but darkness was overtaking the screen. He didn't know what to make of it. Stan skipped to 12, Bill's feed. Bill mumbled on and on about the heavy. He talked about his past and his loneliness. Seeing the grown man cry twisted Stan's stomach in knots. He wanted to walk down the hall and comfort Bill, but knew he wouldn't. Suddenly Bill's feed went black. All they could see were the white of his eyes. Then the eyes smeared like watercolor paint, dripping like tears until everything went dark. Bill's feed had vanished. Stan contemplated checking on Bill or Lois more than ever, but instead, he handed the tablet back to Kendra and climbed under the covers of the bed. She shut off the device and tucked in next to him, wrapping her arms around him. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he slept in her embrace. The following morning, Stan noticed many of the rooms had housekeepers diligently cleaning them, removing personal belongings into a cart. Eugene entered the dining area when Stan and Kendra sat down for breakfast. They overheard him discussing new visitors with Delilah. "What happened to Bill, Lois, and the others?" Stan asked.
They've decided to give up. They're no longer with us in the challenge,
Eugene explained. "Why are new people coming? Does this affect our payout?" "That doesn't seem fair," Stan argued. Eugene chuckled softly, ignoring the question. "Well, answer me, damn it. Am I amusing you? Something peculiar is going on here, and I want answers. You haven't explained nearly enough to us, and if others are coming here to participate, on our level, after we've already been stuck in this house for a week, I don't want to be here anymore," Stan said, agitated.
Everything is fine and nothing unusual is going on,
Delilah said with a wide smile. "Let me speak to Bill. Last night, he wasn't well. I want to know how he's doing," Stan demanded.
We can't give out our contestants' personal information. Not to mention, part of the rules requires no speaking to anyone outside the program. You can take my word for it that he's doing much better now, though, and has been released from the contest,
Eugene replied. "That's bullshit." Stan stood up aggressively, drawing everyone else in the dining room's attention. "Come on, Kendra, we're leaving," he muttered through gritted teeth.
The gate is unlocked. You're free to leave any time,
Eugene said with a smile. Stan and Kendra packed their belongings and stormed out the door, making their way to the gate. Sherry sat on the ground in a white gown, her long brown hair a mess on her shoulders. She cried, visibly afraid, yet she wouldn't leave. Stan tried to help her to her feet, but she pushed his hand away. "Come on, we all need to get out of here. It's not worth whatever they're giving us to stay." "You can come with Kendra and me," Stan insisted.
No, I already tried. I can't leave this place.
Sherry cried. Stan reached for her arm again, and she screamed at him, bursting into tears. "Have you gone insane?" he shouted, leaving her behind. He tugged on Kendra's hand, leading her to the gate. Suddenly, at least half a dozen new contestants entered the gate, pushing past Stan and Kendra, blocking their path. Marty, from room 3, stood half naked in the garden, crushing the tomatoes and smearing them all over his body.
"Leave, turn around, go home,"
he shouted. The new arrivals laughed. They must have thought this was part of the game.
"What are you doing?"
A young man chuckled.
"The colors, they're all gone, just black and white and gray. I want to see the red. I want to see the colors again, like I did before the heavy."
The new contestants laughed, ignoring their warnings, and entered the house. The heavy consumed Marty before their eyes. The blackness surrounded him like a cloud. "We need to leave," Stan whispered to Kendra, pulling her closer to the gate. But then he stopped.
What's wrong?
Kendra asked, her voice muffled as she spoke. Stan felt the pressure wrap around his legs, paralyzing him. He could no longer move. Stan felt dizzy. "I need to lay down," he said against his better judgment. His legs moved without him controlling them, taking him back inside to his room. We were right there, about to leave. What am I doing? Stan thought.
Lay down,
Kendra said softly. Stan sat on the bed, and Kendra was gone in a flash of white lights. He wondered if he had fallen asleep. Then his old St. Bernard Barkley entered the room. It was impossible. Barkley died years ago. He touched the dog's nose and his hand felt heavy. The dog turned into the blackness, then started crawling up his arm, coating it with something he couldn't shake off. The pressure built and spread quickly around his entire body. He couldn't stop the heavy from consuming him. He found it hard to breathe.
Lay down. I think you have a fever.
Kendra's voice spoke out as if she'd never left the room. "We should leave. I'm terrified," Stan thought, but couldn't speak. Stan laid down on the bed as if the heavy was now controlling his actions. The lights dimmed down unnaturally. Stan felt like he was in a painting, and the brush was sculpting the darkness around him. He grew tired and heavy. Stan jolted up from the bed as if awakened from a nightmare, but he was being held back down. He shook and lunged. The black cloud gripped a hold of him tighter than before. He tried throwing his arms around violently but couldn't move. Stan strained with all his might, tears flowing from both eyes. He screamed in silent disarray. Finally, he was able to shake a hand free. He watched a giant black blob fall from his limb. Stan could move his right arm again, but more was creeping towards his hand. He shook again and the blob fell upward, floating to the ceiling. The blackness was relentless. It kept smothering Stan's body. The pressure was like nothing he'd ever felt before, like the heavy was crushing him. He arose from the bed, carrying what felt like the weight of the world. The bedroom became desaturated with black, white, and gray watercolors. The light was no longer light. Stan was in a picture, and all the colors were paint on a canvas. He tried to separate himself, but the heavy grabbed him again with layers of blackness. Stan shook them off, but they came back again and again. He saw himself from what felt like a mirror across the room. He wondered if he had left his body. His face morphed into a black square, and all that differentiated it from the darkness was the white of his eyes. Stan was a blob of black and white paint, struggling to clean himself of the heavy. He couldn't fight it anymore. The pressure built and built until he was nothing but a painting on a wall. He was in bed and couldn't get up. All he felt was pressure all around him. The heavy had him, and he was no longer a man. He saw a painting across the room with Kendra's eyes. A gray streak appeared as her arm outstretched, reaching for him. Eugene entered the room. He picked the paintings of Stan and Kendra up in his arms, carrying them into the dining room. Delilah set a footstool up for him by the wall. Eugene climbed up and placed the pair of paintings alongside the others.
Congratulations, you've won,
he whispered. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe for more content from the Metroshia channel.